Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created this show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, we provide the knowledge, skills, insight, inspiration, and encouragement you'll need to find you're happy. Hello there, lawyers. I cannot believe that it is the end of September. It has been a crazy month for me. This month is birthday month. It's both my sister's birthdays, both my kids' birthdays, my husband's birthday, my sister's-in-law's birthday, and next week we round it all out with my birthday. So in order to celebrate all of these birthdays, I'm going to be doing something big next month, and I hope you guys will play along. So I'll be announcing that on my birthday episode next week. And before I dive into this week's conversation, I just wanted to remind you guys that Elena Deutsch's program, which she discussed 3 episodes ago, is actually launching next month. So I'm super excited to support Elena in that. And I think it's a wonderful program for anybody who's still in big law and thinking about what they want to do next. The program is called Women Interested in Leaving the Law, but it's really just a program that's intended to help you kind of take stock of where you are and create a plan and strategy for where you want to go next, whether that's staying in the law, leaving the law, or just transitioning into a different practice. And for all you gentlemen out there, Elena does partner with a fella, and I don't know why the guy does the guy program and the girl does the girl program, but that's just how it plays out in this case. But she does have a partner who offers a similar program for male associates. So if you're interested in learning about that, you can do that through this link as well. And the link is Women Interested in Leaving Law /happy-lawyer. And that'll take you to the sign-up page for her webinars. And it's a free webinar where she'll talk through the program, what you can expect, what you should anticipate, and all of those fun things. And also she'll drop some knowledge bombs on you guys there. In case you don't want to do the program, you'll still learn a lot just from the webinar. All right, enough housecleaning. Let's get to today's show. Today, I am chatting with the other half of Women-Owned Law. If you guys heard my episode with Nicole Galley, then you know all about women-owned law, and we're not going to be chatting about that in this episode. Instead, we'll be chatting with Gabrielle Sellei about her practice in entertainment law. And so for many of you out there who are interested in representing creative entrepreneurs, whether that's musicians, artists, athletes, or whether you're just interested in becoming a solo practitioner, Gabrielle has so many nuggets of wisdom to share in this episode. So I hope you guys will enjoy, and let me know what you think. Welcome back to the Happy Lawyer Project. I am super excited, you guys, to introduce you today to Gabrielle Sellei. Gabrielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Akoma.
I'm so happy to finally have you on, and I think it'd be great if we could just start with a brief description of who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. I always say, well, not always, but as of 2 years ago, I say I run the smallest law firm in the world, and I also happen to run the law firm that has the highest client satisfaction rate in the world. But I've got no data to back any of that up. So, sorry. But so seriously though, I am a purely transactional lawyer. Most of my clients are a lot like me, creative and entrepreneurial. I would say about half of my clients are what we would consider in traditional business sectors like healthcare, consulting, real estate development, technology. Also a bunch of lawyers and doctors and other professionals, but a huge and sort of the fun part of my practice is devoted to serving what I call my creative and talented people. And those are writers and professional athletes, documentary filmmakers, journalists, sort of your typical basket of what we would call an arts and entertainment type practice. And I also have a bunch of clients that serve the arts, like talent agents and nonprofits in the arts and that kind of thing. So basically, lots of entrepreneurial people, lots of creative people, lots of intellectual property, and lots of contracts. That's what I do all day long.
That's so great. And I think there's so many people who are interested in that area of law, especially as you see kind of this bloom in creative entrepreneurship online. And I am so happy to hear a lawyer talk about client satisfaction when they describe their job and what they do, as opposed to billable hours or profit, or it's just nice because that's what we do, right? We serve our clients, and sometimes that's lost when we talk business.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, you don't ever get more of a sense of that direct relationship between your practice and client satisfaction than when you're one-on-one, like I am, with people like me who are also entrepreneurs. I mean, I am a client and I also serve clients, and it's just like I said, it's just this one-on-one relationship, and there's just a direct correlation between not only how well I serve my clients and them coming back to me, but I live and die by referrals. I don't do any advertising. I don't do any marketing. I mean, my marketing is taking my clients out to lunch because I actually like them as people and I like spending time with them. And I think also in a practice like mine, where I do work with, when I say entrepreneurs, I mean people like me who are very close to their businesses. You know, they're not the CFO of a big business. They are the business. And so there's a huge element of self-selectivity that goes on. I think you can tell, or you'll be able to tell by the end of our conversation today, I have a bit of a personality on me. And so if you don't like that, you won't be my client, or at least not for long, and vice versa. And that's exactly how it should be, at least in my world. You know, I don't have big institutional clients and all of that. But so, and that works out so great for me. And I remember my parents, especially my mom, used to be so worried about me, like, you know, you got to like tone it down a little bit, and you got to be more like a normal lawyer. and and I get where that's coming from, like that fear for your kid, and like you just want your kid to just get along, you know.
Yep.
And I would say to my mom, you know, if I get like 0.0000001% of all the clients that are out there, I will be swimming in work. Like, I don't need to have, you know what I mean? Like I'm fine. I will be good. And that actually calmed my mom down. And it's actually true. There's only so much work I can do in a day. There's only, you know, so much anybody can do, no matter how big your business is. So you just, you know, that to me is go ahead.
No, that's so fascinating, because so many of the things you're saying, I think, have come up over and over again on the show. But I'd be interested to know, how did you come to that mindset? Because I think there's a lot of this scarcity mindset in the profession, which is why people feel like they have to conform, because that's how they're going to get clients. Like, clients expect their lawyers to be a certain way. And if you stray from that, nobody's going to take you seriously. There's not going to be enough clients. But I mean, I think you're right. There are enough clients, and there aren't enough people who are kind of serving those clients on the fringes, you know?
Yeah. You know, and I think the way I've arrived here, well, first of all, you know, I've been practicing for over 20 years now. So I've had a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes and learn the right way to do this and how to calibrate this. Because first and foremost, you've got to be an excellent lawyer. I mean, that is the price of admission to doing what we do, and especially to doing what I do, where I don't have a big law firm brand name. I don't have all of the sort of infrastructure of a big fancy law firm. I don't have a big, you know, fancy conference room where I can meet you and your 40 colleagues. But what I've found is that, you know, it's trial by error, and it's like sort of sticking your little toe out, you know, a little trial balloon. And this, of course, involves really understanding, you know, I know it's very trendy to talk about emotional, what's the term? I'm blanking now, but
EQ.
And EQ, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, all of those concepts. But it's really true. Again, in my kind of practice especially, you stick your little toe out and you kind of see how that goes, and then you can stick it out a little further, you know, both on a one-to-one basis with individual clients, but also in general how you market yourself and brand yourself to the world. And also, there's also a way of sort of framing and marketing yourself that I think you want to sort of own who you are and what you're doing, and not try to hide or try to cover up. And one really perfect example of that is, you know, I run a virtual firm, which is a glorified way of saying I work at home with a laptop and a phone. But I have a paralegal who helps me out on a sort of contract basis. I have attorneys I work with on a contract basis, and also just side by side. So I have this sort of, it really is a virtual practice. And when I started this practice 2 years ago, lots of my clients came over with me from the firm I had been at for quite a long time and had, built a nice practice. But I remember giving my first pitch to a new client, meaning somebody who had been referred to me since I started my own practice, didn't know me from before, and it was actually a really good potential opportunity. He was buying a business, and that's exactly the kind of deal I want to be doing. And so I'm giving him this pitch, and I'm explaining, my background and how this is sort of the bread and butter of my practice, and I'm perfectly capable of doing this, and I would love to do it with him. But I also wanted to give him an understanding of what he was going to be dealing with here, and I wanted to set the expectations appropriately, but I also wanted to frame it as a plus. So the fact that I work from home means I have no overhead. That's great for people like him because that gets passed on to him, of course. The fact that I answer my own telephone when you call me means that, when I'm on the phone with another client, guess what? I'm not going to be answering your call. On the other hand, you don't have to go through 5 people to talk to me. And when I'm available, I pick up the phone and voila, you're talking to me. So there was a series of things I kind of took him through on how the logistics and the infrastructure of my practice work. And what I realized as I was walking through all the stuff, trying not to sound defensive or apologetic, everything I said, he was sort of saying, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I was like, what is he saying? And I stopped and I realized what he was saying was that when he buys this business, which he eventually did buy and which I did help him buy, he was going to become a virtual business himself. He was going to get rid of his super expensive office in New York City, and he was going to kind of, encourage, there was, it was going to be like a telecommuting kind of environment, and he was going to get rid of a lot of overhead, and he was going to, and his business was going to end up looking just like mine. And so it became a plus. It became a selling point. It became all of a sudden, like, here I am, like, thinking I needed to explain something and then realizing I was sounding very cutting edge. So, that's what I mean by there's a sort of self-selectivity that goes on here. And there could have been I could have been on the phone with someone who would have been appalled by that, who would have been like, I need you to have a secretary. I need to be able to reach you or somebody at all times. I get that. That's a model. That works. That's what some clients might need. But not this one. And that was a great deal. And now that's a great client.
That's a great story and such a great example of kind of finding alignment between yourself and your practice and your ideal clients. And I want to go back just a little because you mentioned that it took trial and error, but you also mentioned the importance of being an excellent lawyer. And for some people, that feels like there's a tension there because I think a lot of young lawyers struggle to be perceived as excellent. So there's a fear of failing. And I would be interested in your thoughts about how you become an excellent lawyer and manage failure along the way in order to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. And it's such a huge interest of mine because, being an excellent lawyer, I think for me anyways, it starts with just the hard skills. And these days, I think differently from maybe a generation or two ago, there's an emphasis almost immediately on young lawyers marketing and bringing in business. And I think that's so wrongheaded. I mean, I remember that when I was starting out 22 years ago, and I remember thinking, I don't have anything to sell right now. I don't have any expertise. And they were like, here's your marketing budget and take people out to lunch. And as a long-term play, I sort of understood that. Yes, I should stay in touch with my peers because someday I'll know what I'm doing as a lawyer and someday they'll be in a position to give me business. But I always felt like what I should be doing and my number one task is to be in my office and be taking on as much work as I can and as good work as I can, meaning hard, challenging, things I haven't seen before, and learning. Those early years for me were so much about just, you're really, at least in the kinds of firms I was in, you're drinking from a fire hose, but that's exactly how it should be. And, the people that you're going to be surrounded with, there might not be the warmest and fuzziest people in the world. They're not people you might, be your best friend. But so I feel like to me, it's just all about acquiring skills. And the way to acquire skills, I think, to answer your actual question, is to do it. It's like writing or public speaking or any other kind of skill. You can't learn it in a classroom. You have to do it. You have to make mistakes. You have to study. You have to look at work that other people have done. And you have to just spend a lot of time doing it. And I think that's true of all professions. I don't think that's unique to what we do.
I agree completely. And I, in fact, often talk about how not enough young lawyers are delegating the stuff that isn't teaching them. So they do the low-hanging fruit stuff. And I think that is part of the incentive structure to bill hours, is that sometimes you are tired and sometimes you just want to bill a full day of easy, mindless work. But that's not how you're going to grow. And if you get in the habit of doing that, you're no longer taking on challenging work. And so I love that advice. And I completely agree.
That's a really good point. I mean, you're right. The pressure to bill is and the pressure to bill, and when you get a little more senior, you realize it's not just the pressure to bill, it's the pressure to bill work that the client doesn't have to write off. I mean, that the firm doesn't have to write off and can actually collect on. So it needs to be not something that, so there's a risk there, right? In taking on something new that you've never done before that could get, I mean, I have drafted things that I know had to be torn apart, but that was the tearing apart and the putting back together was where I really learned what I was doing, invaluable.
I'm going to push you a little bit harder on this point because I think it is something that people really, really struggle with. So I'm just going to see if you can kind of talk us through what you say to yourself in that moment. Like in that moment where you work really hard on something and you realize it's crap. Or, you've taken on something and you have this like actual dread that it's too much. You can't do it. It actually might just have been one bite too big. And I assume that's happened. Maybe you can tell me it hasn't, but I've certainly been in that position. And what do you say to yourself? Like, how do you get yourself through that so that you can actually get through it?
I'm probably not the right person to ask, only because I am probably too, and I say this honestly, I'm probably too forgiving of myself. I probably am too, at that stage in my career, I was probably too much of of course I've never drafted a governance agreement before. Of course I don't know what that is. But what I probably should have been doing was going into the form files of the firm, reading every single one that's ever been drafted. And when I get to something I don't know what it is, read it again, read it again and again and again until it starts to make sense. And that's one of the benefits, of course, of being in a firm, and especially a big firm, is just the huge amount of precedent material that's available to you. And now, of course, I mean, the internet's a little bit iffy until you actually know what you're doing and what you're looking for. But as you slowly begin to build sort of a reservoir of knowledge, a sort of library in your own brain of what you're doing and what you should be doing. And so like I said, I think the right thing to do is just to read more. Like they say in law school, just, when you don't know what you're doing, keep reading and it can be tricky, in a law firm, but talking to peers, especially talking to peers in other firms that you're not going to bump into or that are not going to be reviewing your work at some point, can be invaluable as well.
I disagree with you and think that you're actually the perfect person to ask that too, because the two salient points there are, one, be patient with yourself and give yourself the space to be wrong and figure stuff out. And the second point is actually believing that you're capable of learning it. Because I think sometimes people think it's too much, like it's too big. Like I've never done this before. And they just look at the whole agreement instead of thinking, okay, I'm just going to go through it provision by provision. The questions I'm coming up with are good questions. Like they're worthy of being said out loud. And I think sometimes people just get so overwhelmed by the assignment that they're just like, I'm just going to put something out there, take my beating, and move on to the next thing.
Yes.
And that's not how you learn.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think, it's been a while for me, so it's a little hard to think back, but I do think that you can always think back to, when we all started law school, that first week where everything was just a complete jumble of what are these cases I'm reading and what is going on here. I mean, somehow we mastered that and actually got good at it. And I think, that's just the first of many building blocks and the first of many challenges. And I think, hopefully by the time you're, a junior level lawyer at a law firm, you've had some successes, and maybe it just helps to sit back and reframe and get some perspective on the challenges that you've already overcome, because you just have by that point.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And even when I talk to young lawyers, people forget that when you decide when you're like 16 or 17 or 25 or 35 to become a lawyer, you are kind of taking on this giant undertaking, but you're not sitting there as you're filling out, your LSAT application thinking, how am I going to pass the bar exam? And I think sometimes that's how lawyers are. They're like, oh, if I can't do this now, how will I ever be a partner? And you're like, dude, there's like so much between this and that. When you get to that, you'll be ready for that. Just do this first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by definition, we're an ambitious group of people, right? So it is kind of hard to take it step by step.
Yep, for sure. So on that note, I would be interested. So as people may or may not know, you are the other half of Women Own Law. And I had Nicole Galley on a couple weeks ago, and she was fantastic. And we spoke a lot about that organization and what you guys do there. And so I don't want to chat about that here, but along the same lines of what we've been talking about, I'd be interested in knowing kind of how it seems like you take on a lot. It seems like you want to be challenged, you want to grow, you want to learn. You took on this organization on top of starting your own firm. How do you make a decision about when enough is enough?
I'm sorry, when enough is enough?
Like when you've taken on too much, which things are the right things to take on? Obviously, you don't want to find yourself spread too thin for too long.
Yeah. When I was earlier in my career, I served on a number of nonprofit boards around the city of Philadelphia where I live, and really enjoyed that. And I felt like, these organizations, I was able to contribute something, even probably more so than I was contributing to my firm or to the clients I was serving. And then when I had children, I something had to go, and it was all of my nonprofit board work. And that was fine. I mean, that was the thing that had to go. And I've learned, that was the first time I ever really had to affirmatively say, okay, I have to quit something now because something else is taking its place. But how I decide what the things are that I'm going to be doing or not doing is a little bit of a different issue. And of course, my children are much older now, and I have kind of I'm in a position now, both because I'm self-employed and also because of my family circumstances, where I can get back into sort of what I call my extracurricular activities and contribute. And Women-Owned Law in particular is, like so much of my career, is the right thing coming along at the right time, but also my antenna being up and being ready to jump on it. And Nicole and I went out on our own around the same time, and we reconnected. We had worked together at one of our big law firms in the past, and we reconnected because we were both suddenly out on our own, and she told me she was starting this thing. And it's very interesting because earlier in my career, I often felt pushed, by my firms and by the partners that I was working with to get involved in these sort of women's networking type activities. And sort of along the lines of what we were talking about before, in terms of developing an expertise early on, I came to feel like these groups and committees and whatnot actually were it's too hard of a way to say it, but they were almost like a tax on being female, and what I mean by that is while my white, straight, male associate counterparts were in their offices, banging away on their keyboards, learning their craft, I was in my Women in the Profession meetings. My African American colleagues were in their, affinity group meetings. The LGBT people were in their meetings. Maybe what we should have been doing would have been all being back in our offices and just billing like a crap ton of hours and becoming amazing lawyers. Again, it goes back to those very early years and the expertise that you build. And really, I wasn't going to have the authority to change our hiring practices or put in place a maternity leave policy. I wasn't going to be able to affect really anything. But what I could have been doing in those hours would have been, reading those governance agreements again and again and again, or maybe schmoozing with the partners like the guys were doing. And so I felt like that's an example of what not to get involved in, or what for me was something I should not have been allowing myself to get pushed into quite so much. But here we are 20 years later, and all of a sudden this kind of thing is the right thing for me to be involved in. by totally, based on totally different metrics. Like this organization, this is specifically for women who own their own practices. So by definition, this is a group of very competent people and very confident women, which in and of itself was really all I needed to get in the door, because that was a revelation to me. But there's also this dynamic that, no one's pushing us to go to these meetings. No one's trying to make partner. No one's worried that, having a baby is going to destroy their career. Nobody's trying to pink wash their firm by saying, hey, look, we support this. We're just getting together to talk about the things that, any entrepreneurial group of people would care about. Like, who's the best vendor for this? I need a lawyer to help my client with this thing I don't practice. Let's do some CLE. So to your point, this thing fits right now, and I'm getting a lot out of it, at least as much as I'm putting into it. But that other thing, which was kind of a similar thing, didn't feel like it fit that well at a different time in my career. So it's very, it's very opportunistic, and I feel like you can't really go wrong by just pursuing things that you feel passionate about at the moment, and you can really go wrong by letting yourself get talked into things that are just, not the right thing for you, that you feel obligated to do.
That advice impacts so many aspects of your life. That desire to do what you're supposed to do or what you think is supposed to be helpful versus what will actually be helpful for you in that stage of your life and fit into your goals in that stage of your life. I think people sometimes it's the momentum, because for a lot of people in law school, that was like a good way to resume build and to network. And so you go into a firm and you think, well, this is, I know how to do that. And so the work feels a little bit scary, but that feels familiar almost.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I'm not, those, it is a good way to meet people. And there is also, I don't want to be completely naive about the fact that there is quite a bit of politics, in law firm life, or any time you work for anybody or with anybody. And you can't be ignorant of that, but still, you got to be aware of why you're doing what you're doing. And maybe if you go into something like that, thinking the way I do, like maybe this isn't really the best use of my time, but maybe I'm here for other reasons. Maybe this is to build relationships. Maybe this is just for the politics of it, to be a good corporate citizen. I mean, those are valuable things to do early in your career, certainly.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone should take away from what you're saying is do what you did, because that's the right order in which to do it, as much as what you're saying is really be aware of why you're doing what you're doing so that you're not wasting time kind of just filling your days.
Right.
Before, I have a couple more questions before I let you go. And as an entertainment kind of law, I think people would be interested to know, is it all parties and limo rides? And I mean, in my mind, I imagine it's almost like you're in partnership with your clients in the commercial and the legal, because they are entrepreneurs like yourself. But I'd be interested in knowing kind of day to day, what is it like to do that practice as to compare to big law, which is, I think, what most of my listeners are familiar with.
Yeah, well, I love that question, because I really do love this part of my practice. As far as the sort of day to day, I think I might have mentioned earlier, I spend a lot of my time drafting agreements that have a lot of intellectual property issues, and both, what we think of as traditional IP type stuff, but also issues where your client is also a person, but where your person is also a persona, when they have some prominence and a brand of their own. And yes, I hate that term when it's applied to people, but there's a whole other set of really interesting dynamics to consider. But really, at bottom, a contract is a contract, and I happen to love I love contracts. I just do, and I understand them. I love drafting them. I love thinking about them, and that's a lot of what I do on that side of my practice. Ironically and sadly, my clients, because of who they are, their stuff is out in the world all the time. I just missed the opening at Philadelphia's major art museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art here. A client of mine who's participating in a very, very interesting and exciting citywide massive art installation. I couldn't go to the opening. I'm just too busy, and it's sort of ironic that I always joke about how I'm like the entertainment lawyer that doesn't have time to watch TV. I have no idea what's going on in popular culture. I don't have time to go. If I went to like all of the art openings and plays and events and whatever that my clients so kindly invite me to on the things that I help them with, I would have zero time to practice law. So to your question, it could be a round of parties and galas and openings. It could be, but I would very quickly have no clients and no work left. So it's not. It's just practicing law.
Yep.
And the other thing that you touched on that was interesting is the idea of artists sometimes acting as, or sort of blurring the lines. Lawyers sort of blurring the lines between what we do and what an agent or a manager would do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whenever you have a client who is an individual, there's a little bit of, there's the extra personal touch. Can I get you, I'll take you to the airport after this meeting or whatever that is. But I always make it very clear, and this happens more in the music part of the business than in some of the other media, but I make it very clear, like I said before, I don't know what's going on in the world, pop culture-wise. If I love your treatment or your sizzle reel or your whatever, your pilot, it's probably going to bomb because I have just my own unique taste. I don't have any sense of the market value of anything. And so it's probably best that I stay completely neutral in terms of I don't want to say the value, but the sort of commercial value of the work that I deal with. It's just not my place. I don't get involved. I know that there's lawyers who do. And I also, I really stay away from that as much as I can. And I encourage my clients, which is a hard sell, to have both an agent and a lawyer, which is a really hard sell because everybody wants to just have one or the other because it's expensive. Yeah. But we have very different skills and very different areas of expertise. I've never seen an agent really take a proper interest in an indemnity provision or any kind of, liability prevention technique. And by the same token, I don't think about the money side of things except to make sure that my clients get paid for the work they do and, early and often.
That's a very fair point. And I had never really considered being an entertainment lawyer because I'm so introverted. I can't imagine, but I love contracts. So it's great. I have so many litigators on the show. So it's great to talk to somebody else who says things like, I love contracts. That makes me really happy. I love drafting contracts. I love kind of having to put together provisions that I've never seen before.
Yeah. It's like this little perfect world. Like if everybody just did what was in the contract, it would be so great.
Oh, I know.
Because they have this internal logic to them and they lay out this course of behavior that's supposed to happen. And of course, I always tell my clients, look, this is sort of a default because what's going to happen in real life is you're going to have a discussion when something goes south. Yep. But you want to have the best possible default in place for yourself when that happens. But yeah, I like that. That's 60-70% of my practice, and I really, really like it.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of this project and sharing your story with my audience here today. And before I let you go, my very last question for you is, I would love your final thoughts on what you think separates lawyers who are happy from lawyers who struggle to find happiness in life with a law degree. Oh,
if it hasn't been done already, Okoma, you should write a book on this topic. I'm sure you're gathering a lot of, because this is such a great idea, and it's such a great question to be thinking about, and it doesn't just apply to lawyers, but what makes you happy in any career. And unfortunately, like my one thought about this, my biggest thought about this is really that in the law, it's kind of a front end issue. And what I mean by that is that, I'm sure we all saw this in law school. And when I did interviewing for summer associates at my bigger law firms as an associate myself, it was pretty clear that a lot of young people had fallen for that, you can do anything with a law degree concept. And law school became this sort of default, this kind of dumping ground for a lot of smart, articulate, thoughtful political science majors and history majors and philosophy majors who didn't really have a clear idea of what to do with their lives. And then they got sucked into that law firm conveyor belt that you're on where, it just kind of like plops out first-year associates at the end. And then that was that. And, you don't ever want to pick a career or make any major life decision by default. That's tragic. But that's what a lot of this is. And I'm sure that the economic crash that we went through about 10 years ago, and of course, the enormous student debt you need to take on these days has probably washed some of that away. But I still think that you can do anything with a law degree kind of thing is just a silly platitude and really not a good way to choose a career. On a more positive note, I think that the other idea that I have about this issue, which is kind of related, and what we've been talking about for the past however long we've been talking, which is that you got to love this stuff, the actual substance of it, not the schmoozing and not the whatever, but you got to love the actual substance of what we do, because it's hard and it's demanding, and if you don't love it, life is going to be extra, extra miserable for you. So, and if you do love it, like I do, and like you do, you will overlook a lot to do this, to get to do this kind of work.
That's a great answer. And I love this question because I think that there's so much overlap in the answers, but so much texture and richness to the way every person experiences it. So I love getting people's different perspectives. And thank you so much for sharing yours.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for the Happy Lawyer Project podcast. Please head over to my website, www.thehappylawyerproject.com, for more information from today's show. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave me your thoughts on the show. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or follow me on Instagram. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to head over to iTunes to subscribe and review the show. As you know, each rating helps more listeners find the show and helps me get awesome guests on here for you guys. If there's anyone you'd like me to have on the show, or if you'd like to be on the show, head over to my website and let me know, or send me an email at Okoma, OKEOMA, @thehappylawyerproject.com. A special thanks to everyone who's left a review, sent me an email, or reached out to me in any way. I appreciate you. Thank you again for spending this time with me, and if you would like to learn more about working in your gift and living your passion, head over to the website for a free gift. Until next time, bye!